there's cruelty in Darkest Dungeon that is not present pretty much in any other game. And I truly believed, up until we're in the end game, right? We've reached the end game, is that cruelty, I'd seen what needed to be seen. I had witnessed the Collector appearing literally just before the boss door of a boss mission to destroy your characters before you enter the boss room, even though you've just rested and camped and got all the buffs in the world, and he just spawns right in front of the boss door and says, hello. I have seen the Shambler appear multiple times in one dungeon run and had to run away like a coward, and I have seen many of my characters fall to their doom, but today, I found that cruelty doesn't end there. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Darkest Dungeon, where we had one thing on our minds since last time we spoke, and that was conquering the Darkest Dungeon. I honestly don't know when this run ends, and now I kind of do. As far as I was concerned, from a stream perspective, once we'd killed the boss in the Darkest Dungeon, I was not super excited about like just redoing it like 3 times like we had done with every other boss in the game. It was like, we beat the Darkest Dungeon and then we're going to fight the exact same boss again but with more health, whatever. But we've got the strategy down, and if you've got the strategy down and you know the characters that can tackle it, the fight is kind of done before you even get there. The struggle is getting there in good condition. That's kind of it. But it turns out the devs, oh, those sweet devs, they knew. They knew that's what you'd be thinking. They knew. Oh, they knew. It starts the morning. Need to do a little bit of leveling because I know after our first disastrous visit to the Darkest Dungeon where we peeked inside, that bleed is a big problem. A lot of the enemies do bleed. It's really nasty. So I think each individual stack is like 6 bleed damage every round for like 4 rounds, right? That's 24 damage, man. That's not a joke. And if they hit you with it again, it's 48 damage. It's more than the HP of your character in just bleed. And it applies it a lot. And you can't take, because the store is limited when you provision, enough bandages to just clear it away. You can't do that. So you need characters that can either get rid of bleed, cure bleed, something like that. So I prepared a Plague Doctor. Plague Doctors can cure bleed on anyone. I prepared a Highwayman or a Grave Robber, I'm not sure, who can cure bleed on themselves. And I decided to equip the other 2 with massive bleed resist trinkets, like flat 33% bleed resist trinkets. So ideally, if they do get bled, we can clear it, but ideally they won't get bled at all. And that's the deal. So I was feeling pretty good about the team I put together. And I had to do a couple of runs and then stress relief to get the right team. I was going Occultist, Grave Robber, who else did I take? I can't remember. I can't remember right now. But I know my Occultist, I've grown in love with Occultists. Their healing is completely RNG, but for the most part, it seems to work in your favor. Like, you do get the occasional heal, which is 0, but for the most part, it'll either be equivalent to a Vestal or considerably more. It's just they don't have AoE healing. But if they do pop off with them 48 plus heals, doesn't really matter. You can bypass it. But not only that, they do bonus damage to Eldritch. We're going to be fighting Eldritch inside the Darkest Dungeon. They also have the best debuffs so far. They can reduce the target's dodge, they can mark the target, and they can also remove protection off the target. And we know it's got that. So I was feeling really confident. In we go, my friends. Our second visit to the Darkest Dungeon. Spooky in places, but one of the things that I did decide to focus on this time was stuns, because the Occultist can stun, has a really powerful, I think it's like 140% base stun, so that's 140% chance to do it, versus their, like, say, 80% chance to resist it. Plus, you can get a trinket which buffs that by another, like, 40%, so you have a really good chance of landing the stun. And I also brought the Plague Doctor to stun the back row. Pretty solid stuff. I could CC a lot of the ads. So that worked out heavily in my favor as I weaved through the Darkest Dungeon. I had seen the map before the first time we've been there, so I have a general idea of what we're going to do. And very quickly, I was like, okay, we go here. Some tough fights here and there, but overall not too bad. Made sure my camping skills were on point. Set up camp. Got everybody clear. Really in good condition to head into the last boss. In we go. I have to say, the fight went pretty well. It really did. The fight went pretty well. I knew certain things. One, don't bother with the ad. Although the priest ad is very scary and does lots of damage, if you kill that ad, it spawns a wall with a lot of health, which also guards the boss. Our goal here is simple. Mark the boss, do a lot of damage to it. Simple as that. Work in coordination for massive lunges into the boss that are working with blight debuffs and marked debuffs to do considerable amounts of damage and bring it down. Ladies and gentlemen, we beat the darkest dungeon. 0 deaths, collect, do not pass go, do not collect. Because then the true horror that those of you who have played this game dawned on me. I had a team that I was very happy with that crushed the darkest dungeon. And then 2 things happened which are of importance to today's tale. 1, you do not just kill the boss again. Because I wasn't sure at this point whether we were kind of done with Darkest Dungeon and moving on to Warhammer Summer. No. In fact, you have a mission. It gives you 3 trinkets, which I was very confused by. Because it said 100% stress reduction and 100% damage reduction. The bit I ignored was Revelation. And it became apparent when I was reading it and looking at it and assigning my trinkets. I was like... So I just have, like, no stress on certain characters and stuff. And I was like, oh, it's against something specifically called Revelation. So there's something in the Darkest Dungeon called Revelation, which if you don't have the trinket equipped, you get owned. And it only gives you 3 trinkets for 4 people. So somebody is always at risk. Again, that little bit of cruelty. But that's not the cruelest thing, is it? That's not the cruelest thing. If you look at my character sheet now, you will notice there's some of them who have a torch next to them. I assumed they'd been promoted to, like, legendary status. So they're level 6 caps, but now they're legends of the Darkest Dungeon. No. This means they're so traumatized by their visit to the Darkest Dungeon, they refuse to ever go back there. Now, what was interesting is the game said some characters will just flat out refuse to ever go back to the Darkest Dungeon. Some of them will, but they'll be highly stressed. I have dragged every one of these characters into the slots and none of them will go. That's really cruel because this is my team. These are my boys. And this is really, really cruel. That they'd say, oh, those are the 4 characters. Those were like the team you built and put together. This was the specific combo that you liked. You can't use them again. And there's 3 more Darkest Dungeon runs to go on. A dagger. A dagger to my heart, my friends. A dagger. I was like, I don't know what to do. But at the same time, I kind of respect it. It must have been a tough decision for them, I think. But they want you to overcome a struggle like Dark Souls does. They want you to not just power level a certain team that works. You know, maybe you've read a good synergy online and you just power level that team and they never lose and you just go and win the game. They don't want you to do that. They want to have a fulfilling gaming experience, because if a lot of the stuff that is frustrating about Darkest Dungeon was taken away, this game would be too easy and not interesting. It's the danger and the fear that constantly creeps back up on you that makes it into a full, worthwhile gaming experience. So I kind of respect the choice, and because immediately I fell back into, who the hell can I take this time? I immediately was like, can I put a team together? And I was still under the impression that the boss is going to be in there, and I'm like, this boss juggles my party around. One of the big things I built my first Darkest Dungeon team around was being capable of being very effective regardless of what position they were in. That's not a trait that comes lightly, certainly to level 6. So I was like, a leper, if the leper moves to like 3rd or 4th position, they're useless and you've got to try and get them back. So maybe I need to bring somebody who will jump around them so they can't move, but somebody else will move them for them and still be effective. So maybe a jester, a grave robber, a highwayman could do some movement, like a holy lance from a crusader, things like that, so I can sort of juggle the party around. I was really struggling with this. But then I read the mission. I was already in my head about what was going to happen next and kill the boss again. Until I read the mission. The mission's changed. The mission now is to light 3 lanterns inside. So then my brain went to the idea of, oh, the trinkets I got, which are called torches, are probably used in the dungeon to light these things. So you have to take these 3 things with you when you go into Darkest Dungeon Round 2, light the things, and that will consume the trinket probably. Or maybe not. I don't know. Something along those lines. And maybe I have to do this with half trinkets, adding that other layer of cruelty and difficulty to it. So you've got to do it with half trinkets now, which you actually do. Now I've done it. But I was so enamored to get back in there and try Dungeon 2. So I put another team together. The most scuffed team. They shouldn't have survived. I had no healers based on the video we did yesterday. I had no healers available. My occultist who went on the first Darkest Dungeon run refuses to go again. So my team was a crusader. This crusader's job was to be a buffer healer. I brought a hunter. I brought a hunter who can also off-heal, but can mark the target and reduce protection. I brought another highwayman that can do bonus damage on marked targets, and that will be our main DPS. And I brought a leper, who will also be top DPS. But I'm rolling the dice here on whether you fulfill the mission and then you fight the boss. I also didn't realize this is a long mission. I avoided the long missions because you're in there for a long, long time, and often you're throwing away loot because your inventory's full until you use the camping things, because your inventory isn't bigger on long missions. So I was like, okay, we got a long mission in here. But I'm going in anyway. I'm curious. This was the sacrificial lamb team. I needed to know what was inside, like I did the first time. I have to know, so somebody's got to go in there. But I gave them the best chance. I gave them the best trinkets. I can always try and get them back from the Shrieker should they lose. Like it's just a loss of 4 level 6 characters with, you know, tens of thousands of gold invested in them. No biggie, right? So I got them ready, and I sent them in. I'm kind of glad I clocked how the mapping system in here worked, because you can't scout the Darkest Dungeon. It only reveals itself once you've entered a certain room. And it presented me with 3 directions to go, north, east, and west. So I was like, right, we'll go west first and see what happens. And it clearly starts to form like a square. So I was like, okay, and then we went this way. And then I luckily, very luckily, went to the position where the mini-boss was. These Templars, which related to the trinket. And it turns out the trinket you have equipped is for a specific attack that those enemies do, called Revelation. And if you don't have it equipped, it does massive amounts of damage and massive amounts of stress. And there's a 1 in 4 chance that it will land on the person who does not have the trinket. And I was like, oh, I get it. I beat it, the first mini-boss. And then I was like, right. I'm in a really bad way here, because it became apparent very quickly that as an idiot, I didn't bring a way of reducing the enemy's dodge rate. And I'm a very melee, physical damage dealing team. And it really, really caused a problem in that my guys just couldn't hit anything. And I was being worn down. And it became very apparent that my choice of Crusader and Hunter Healer was not coping with the damage this dungeon did at all. And I was being worn down, grinded into dust after the first one. So I was like, okay, I've got no choice. We killed the Templar. I'm going to make my way back to the beginning because it gave me north, east, and west. I'm guessing that one of these mini-bosses exists in north, east, and west, right? So I'm going to go back to the beginning, and then I'm going to go north. Then I'm going to go back to the beginning. So I'm going to camp at the beginning room every time, and then go north, deal with that one, come back, camp again, and then go for the other one. So I could sort of reset the run each time. That was my game plan. Made sense, in theory. Except for the fact that they're not... Well, I do know now they're in set locations. I'm pretty sure if I did this again, they would be in the same locations. Because in the north one, the boss is in the very, very north. I didn't know that at the time. I went into a side room, did extra fights. Got a really cool trinket out of it. Had some money. But worn down again. And long story short, my friends, take a look at the situation during this last fight. And just watch it in the background while I'm explaining to you what happens here. So I enter the last room, and it turns out the final fight is against both of the type of Templars. The Impaler, I think it's called, and the Burster or whatever. One is more blight focused than the other, and the other one sticks like spikes through your chest. I am running on empty. I have camped before, but I've had to go through so many fights that have caused me a lot of stress that already my boys are stressed out. I managed to get 2 virtues out of here, and I figure at this point, either I'm really lucky, we've certainly not modified it in any way, but you have a higher virtue chance in the Darkest Dungeon. I think that is some leeway they gave you because the stress is really bad if you don't have something like a Jester. Even the Inspiring Call of the Crusader was nowhere near enough, and my Leper, who can reduce his own stress, was nowhere near enough to cope with the levels of stress that are in this dungeon. I decided the only strategy here was to get rid of one quickly. Like, that had to happen before I go into what I was doing throughout the rest of the dungeon, which was healing rounds. I was really greeding out as much as possible the last mob to re-heal the group, otherwise they were going to die. So I was thinking I need to get down to 1. 1 I think I can cope with even being in a bit of a deficit of health and come back from it and keep people sort of bouncing around a little bit. But then dodges and things started happening and it was bad. My team is on very low health as I managed to clear off the first of the 2 Templars. And it's not looking good. I get engaged with the second one, and I've got no choice here but to try and just sort of heal people close to death's door, and then blight started landing, and I had no way of removing blight. And this blight, I'm pretty sure at one point Jace, our hunter, was ticking for, I think, 14 or 20 damage per round for 5 rounds. Like, and it might have been 10. It might have been 10 damage for 5 rounds. That's 50 damage. I can't heal that. And I can't get rid of the blight. I've used all the anti-venom. There's nothing I can do. I managed to get the boss down to, as you can see, I think 50 health. And every single... 2 of my team are at death's door. Another one's hit death's door. And one, I think it was Sadby, was the only man standing with some HP. And I had a choice to make. Now, Jace, who our titular hunter is named after, was watching. There was a good chance in my mind that Jace could heal himself out of death's door, even though he had blight. Or he could send it. And send that damage in. So I offered the choice to our viewer, who it is named after. I said, Jace, make the call. Do we send it? You could kill it in this round, and it won't get another turn. Or do we heal it up? Jace replied, don't you dare send it. But that's the wrong choice. That is the wrong choice. So I sent it. And it did no damage. Like 10. And then I sent Sadby, who does the most damage out of all the group. And he did 4. It's not good. Or something like that. It was very, very low. Which means we're going another round. As you can see at the end of this fight, my friends. All my party was 1 hit from death. Everybody. Every single person was 1 hit from death. And it brought me back to those best mythic raid kills where you're scrambling for that 1 point of damage. And I just sent everything I could, praying and hoping that these guys would not die. Because they would all have died in the next round, 100%. And I'm glad to say we overcame the odds. They all walked out with no more. Not one person had more than 6 HP, I don't think. And 2 of them were every single member of the party was flashing. 2 of them were dead next turn. If we would have taken a footstep with Jace, his blight would have ticked and he would have died, I think. Thankfully. And I was saying at the time, like, if there's a boss after this, this is one of the dirtiest, filthiest dungeons I've seen in a video game ever after what we've been through to get here. And I didn't move. I was wary that if we walk, Jace's blight will tick because it consider it a turn. So I just stood still. I clicked the thing. Quest complete and go home. And we brought our boys home. No man left behind. We brought this scuff garbage team out of here that were destined to die. That's why they were going in there, was to see what was in there. And they brought it home. But then it got even worse. I'm presented with the 3rd quest of 4. There's 4 quests. And the 3rd quest is a brand new, unlocked difficulty called Exhaustive Mode. And I can't take these players that just came out of there. 8 of my level 6s are now locked away and can't be used. And I now have to go on an exhaustive mission, which has 4 camping opportunities in it. 4 in the belly of the beast. I'm dreading it. I actually have to level some more characters to even try this, because the level 6s I have left have no chance whatsoever. And considering it's going to be a very long mission, it's all about sustain. So I'm thinking Jester to keep the stress levels down. I'm probably going to have to start working on negative traits, which I've ignored and explained in other videos. But man, I've got to say this, it felt awesome. It felt so good to do 2 out of 4 of the Darkest Dungeons missions, no deaths, with the drama that unfolded towards the end. You can see my heart rate skyrocketing. That's really high for me as we got there. This game just delivers. It delivers in spades, and I can't wait to let you know what's next. So I'll see you then. Bye, guys.